On the 1st of November 2013, the Nigerian power sector was privatized to majorly ensure stable electricity supply to both homes and also industries across the country. Well, 8 years after, the privatization program has become an exercise almost in futility, according to some, as power supply continues to worsen and no major stride has been recorded in the sector. Rather, operators, regulators and the various government agents saddled with the responsibility of managing the sector are daily engrossed in the war of words. A latest data obtained from the Federal Ministry of Power shows that power generation in Nigeria dropped from a peak of 4,224.9 megawatts on Sunday, that's the start of this week, to 3,844.3 megawatts on Monday, the 2nd of November, meaning that the sector has been struggling with power generation and supply in the past 8 years. It will interest you to know that there is an estimate of about 150 billion naira yearly budget from 2022 to 2027 to support revenue shortfall of the discos to ensure consumers are not allowed to bear the brunt of inconsistencies in the system. However, with this financial intervention to the power sector, one of the questions Nigerians are asking is, why do we still have epileptic power supply? Well, joining me now virtually to discuss this and much more, I have the Chief Executive Officer of Century Power Generation Limited, Chukwueloka Umeh. Good to have you on the show this afternoon.
Nice to have you. Nice to see you, David. Thank you.
Now, the month of November this year marks exactly 8 years since the privatization of Nigeria's power sector. But little successes, as we know, have been recorded. Take, for example, at the start of this week now, we moved from about 4,224.9 megawatts to about 3,844 megawatts on Monday. Now, how do you see this playing out, especially for the calls for reforms, looking at revisiting the privatization process? What in particular would you like to see change, really?
David, if you recall the many conversations that we've had on this topic, everything I've said has remained the same, and the results that I told you were going to happen are playing out now. We want to see policies that are frozen for at least 10 years. I mean, we make a plan, freeze the plan for 10 years, and let's go with the plan. We can't continue to flip-flop on our policies. We cannot continue on a path where the economy is not stable, investors are scared, the rule of law is not there to enforce our policies and the contracts that we sign, and the privatization hasn't been finished as we know it. And in the middle of this, there's so much confusion in the market. This is not a sector, this is not the kind of playing field where you expect to see any progress. And remember what I told you a long time ago, we're still going to be talking about the same thing year in, year out, unless we do something drastically different.
What would you want to see drastically done differently?
So what I would like to see is this. I would like to have the people that are the right folks driving this sector. If you have a cardiac problem, you don't go to see a dentist, you go to see a cardiologist, right?
Exactly.
You want to see people that understand the sector, driving the sector. And then the government needs to protect the sector so that it's devoid of politics, is devoid of personal interests, and is also devoid of all the isms that we know. You know those isms. So let's not talk about them here. So first of all, protect that sector. Okay. Mm-hmm. Second of all, we need to provide proper incentives. So if tax incentives have been provided for people importing equipment, because let's be honest, virtually all the equipment that we use in the sector is imported. Let's provide proper tax incentives. If we're going to give them loans, let's provide single-digit loans to people. And then let's make sure that foreign investors understand that we are serious to do business. 2011, 2012, 2013, a lot of foreign investors flocked to Nigeria to invest in the power industry because we sounded serious. We showed a lot of seriousness. But from that point on, everything has gone down the toilet. So we need to show some seriousness.
Well, talking about showing some level of seriousness in terms of the power sector now, let's look at the conversation around data management and customer data collation or information. We cannot necessarily attend to the call for improved power supply if we don't even know the customer base, wouldn't you say? Especially as we're having conversations around on-grid and off-grid power solutions and broadening the spectrum.
You know, in a country of over 200 million people, according to the data that we're told, you know, we're still talking about having about 10 million customers, you know, whether they're homes or, yeah. So that's the drop in the dime. That tells you specifically that we don't have the right data. Granted, the data is wrong. In each of the 11 discos, they have a general idea of how many customers that they can get. If we are again serious about holding the discos accountable for getting the proper data, let the discos be in charge of our destinies, okay? So completely privatize the discos. Give them the ability, the power to get this information, give them the power to invest. And they can only invest if they're sure that they'll make their money back. Then you'll start to get some of the right data. But if we don't do this, the data will always be wrong. And guess what? Some people are benefiting from having the wrong data.
And now let's also look at the fact that we have issues around evacuation. According to some government authorities, this is at the heart of the priority of government. We have a pegged capacity of about 14,000 megawatts, although compare this to other developing nations or nations like South Africa and then others on the African continent, it's still just a little sum we are generating. And then we're seeing that we're capable of producing around 7,600, yet we can't carry that whole sum. Instead, what we see is just a distribution of, say, about 4,000, 3,000. How do we now begin to bridge this gap, really, in terms of the number of interventions we have, what is available, and what the system can carry and distribute effectively for us to have improved power supply?
So again, David, you know, the reason that the government wanted to privatize the industry is because they thought that the government will not be able to run this sector properly. Given that, why is the government still holding on to the transmission? Why are they still holding on to some percentage of the discos? If we're serious about fixing transmission, for example, privatize it completely. Okay. Once you privatize it completely, then whoever is running it, or whoever the people that are running it, will run the transmission network as a business. Think about this. Over the past 8 years, we've improved that transmission to what? 8,000 megawatts capacity. Okay? And they're never going to see this entire 8,000 megawatts used. See, let's compare ourselves to a country like Vietnam. In 2005, Vietnam started to renovate or refurbish their power sector, and they went from 12,000 megawatts to 40,000 megawatts in a space of 10 years. So it's doable. And they only have a population of about 94 million people. So this is doable. But guess what? They laid out a roadmap for 10 years, and they stuck to that roadmap. They split up their sector into 8 pieces, just like we've done. Genco, transmission, distribution, bulk trader, and so on and so forth. And they stuck to the plan. No politics, no isms. That's what we need to do here. If we are serious, we will see our transmission networks move to what we call a super grid. We're seeing this across the globe today. And we're very good at copying. If we're very good at copying, why don't we copy the good things? But our policies continue. Now we're talking about solar. You have not used the gas, the abundant gas supply that we have, and you're jumping all the way to solar. Some people are still talking about nuclear. Why can we not focus on what we have? We can't focus because there's so much noise in the background, and people are listening to all this noise. So the folks that know what to do are not being allowed to do the job. That's the real problem.
And as part of the problems now, some say talk is cheap, really. Now, we look at the presidential power initiative in terms of partnership with Siemens. Not much has been heard about that since the mention of that by the president. How do you see the narrative changing with such partnerships, really, if we have things coming to bear through this partnership?
So I said it last year when that program came around. You know, Siemens is a company that wants to make a profit. Okay, Siemens should focus on providing equipment, you know, selling equipment, either power generating equipment or distribution equipment or whatever. That's their forte. Okay, and the government has no business, in my opinion, putting money in that investment. Now think about this. They want to help us with the flare down initiative. We don't need a Siemens to help us with the flare down initiative. We need them to focus on selling equipment. Now, I think that the government will be better served taking some of that money and helping to provide single-digit loans to private companies that can work on the flare down initiatives, that can build pipelines, that can build GenCos or fix existing GenCos or build new ones, that can work on the transmission network, and the companies that are in the distribution networks already. Okay, this is where these monies should be spent. Not starting one initiative after another. Now we've started the solar initiative. Now we have the metering initiative. We are also putting money through the government to build new plants. How can you privatize plants? You sell some and then you want to build new ones. So we are all over the place. There's no cohesive strategy that's being driven and executed, and this is part of the problem.
And talking about strategies now, let's look at the fact that the reality remains that we don't necessarily have cost-reflective tariffs, and this is the argument of government stating that if we don't have this, we cannot necessarily have a whole lot of infrastructure development and then bring some sanity in the market. Now, we've had several attempts looking at the gradual review of the cost of tariffs here in Nigeria, but there are a whole lot of questions raised by the masses, red flags here and there. And the argument is that if we still have the same power infrastructure, how then do you promise us increased or improved power supply and then you want to charge more? So the only reality we would have is that there's an increase in charge, but not necessarily a change in the power supply volume that we would have. Do you understand this?
Yeah, there are many topics within that one topic. You know, there's energy responsibility. So your cell phone, for example, you wouldn't call someone and just set the phone down. You're not talking, but your credit is burning. You will speak. After speaking, you hang up the phone. In the same way, if you, in your house, you're paying the right tariff, you would make sure that your household or your company doesn't waste electricity. So if you have air conditioners running in rooms where there's nobody, you will turn them off so that you're not paying very much, okay? So the discos, for example, are right in asking for a higher tariff so that they can make the investments required to improve their discos. The GenCos are right in asking for a higher tariff because they want to be able to buy and maintain their equipment and buy gas, okay? So that is the right thing to do. However, unfortunately, the people are suffering. You know, minimum wage hasn't increased. Inflation is very high. The exchange rate is on a roller coaster ride. So people are right in screaming that the tariff is too high. But again, remember that we've talked about chicken and egg before. Chicken and egg, which one comes first? Should we increase tariff, right, so that we can see an improvement in the power sector? Or should we improve the power sector first before increasing tariff? Of course, the people in the private sector will tell you we need an increase in tariff for things to get better. So there's some balance somewhere, okay? But again, the government's role in helping out is provide monies that would help the masses to make more money so that they can pay the higher tariffs. Because whether we like it or not, you have to pay higher to see better service. Yes, service has improved in some places. Okay, there's still a lot to be done across the country. Few people have seen an improvement in the service across the country. However, it's still a drop in the ocean as far as people are concerned. So
the lamentations also continue into the reality of the menace of estimated billing. Now, I'm sure you might not necessarily have a first-hand experience of this menace of estimated billing and have to pay for that, but that's what the masses really feel. And in terms of bridging the metering gap as well, we've had a whole lot of schemes such as MAPS as well. You've talked about having new power plants and selling old ones, gas power plants, looking at the future of hydro power plants and a whole lot more. How do we begin to deal with this twin wing of the menace of estimated billings and then also metering, Yes, the conversation locally is that we can actually assemble some meters here, but we also have inflationary pressures being heightened in terms of bringing all of these items being assembled in the country. How do we just bring some ease in terms of metering? The bottlenecks are just makes no sense, really, in simple terms.
Yes, again, it's a big topic. The government, in my opinion, did the right thing by trying to help in metering. However, it's a band-aid that we're putting on a wound, on an open wound. Okay? The discos should be the ones providing the meters and finding a way to pay for it. I mean, if they provide the meters, they will somehow put it in people's tariffs, and people will end up paying for the meters over time. Now, the metering programs that have been provided, the MAP, then there's now the national meter program that's been started by the government. So they want to have meters assembled in Nigeria, which is great. They provided about 60 billion naira through the CBN to help local manufacturers. But these local manufacturers are turning around to screen that commercial banks are the ones administering these loans and are giving it to them at rates of about 20%. Now, with the inflation that we're seeing in the country, with the exchange rates that we're seeing in the country, these guys are still suffering. So, in the first phase of the NMMP that the government rolled out, they plan to provide about a million meters. They've only done about 750 to 800 meters in 8 months, which is okay. Now they're talking about doing 4 million meters in the same program in the next phase. But again, it's too little, too late. I say that should be put back in the hands of the discos, and the discos should be held accountable to do what they were supposed to do in the first place. Stop estimated metering by providing meters to all their customers. Let them go figure it out. That's their job. However, the government also needs to do their own part to make sure that all the agreements they have with the discos and the GENCOs have been met. The GENCOs, some are complaining that even their power purchase agreements haven't been signed. Where do you start? Who do you blame?
Exactly. Who do you blame? Now, Dr. Umeh, let's also look at now bridging this gap. The capacity of local assemblers versus what we churn out are two different realities, really. Now, how do we simplify this rollout scheme? Yes, the government set targets to say 1 million, 2 million over a span of time, but the capacity of local assemblers, as the argument is going, is that they can actually churn out thousands more than what the government... So it's really just plain conservative, yet not turned into the bottlenecks of accessing it. And yes, for these meters, there are complaints that some individuals are having lump sums been put on meters that they not necessarily consumed any electricity on, yet these bills are generated just for want to have a prepaid meter. So the narrative is swinging in different ways that not so many people see clarity.
Again, there will be no clarity as long as there are all these interventions. Go back to what the privatization was supposed to be all about. Reducing aggregated technical commercial collection losses is the responsibility of the discos, not the government. The government is supposed to watch them to make sure they do that. And part of doing that is metering the customers. Let the discos figure out how to do the metering. That's their job. But on the government side, provide the regulations to allow them to do their job. Okay? On the government side as well, assist the manufacturers by providing proper single-digit loans so that they can manufacture locally. Guess what? You cannot, someone assembling meters here in Lagos or in Oshodo or wherever cannot compete with someone bringing those meters in from overseas, because that person coming from overseas has access to single-digit loans from that country. China, South Africa, wherever, okay? Whereas people here are dealing with double-digit loans. So let's go back to the fundamentals of the privatization. Let's not get carried away in all the noise. We have no business talking about metering as part of the government. Focus on your job regulation, but then in that regulation, we should remember regulation should be a catch-up game. Regulation shouldn't be the one leading. We've tried to regulate this market into existence, and that's why it's not working. Regulation should always play catch up and is there to help provide a framework for the private companies to do what they're supposed to do, which is provide available, reliable, quality power to people, period. All interventions from the government should be to assist these private investors to do their job, and then to make sure that they do it legally within a framework.
Dr.
We've done it differently.
I'm hard pressed for time. This is a very big conversation, but let's wrap things up now. This is 8 years exactly since we've had the privatization. What do you see as the future of power generation in Nigeria? Some say we have to look at the argument of solar. Some say wind is the next thing we have to look at. Others are also saying that, well, government is looking at a relationship with Russia and the Russian state nuclear corporation, Rosatom. Some say we have no business dealing with Russia.
David, again, if you have a cardiac problem, go to a cardiologist. If you have a dental problem, go to a dentist. Okay? We have all the resources we need in Nigeria to provide more power than we need in country. We have abundant gas supply to provide all the power we need in Nigeria and more. Okay? We need to tap into that. Solar can come later. Wind can come later. You look at UK, for example. UK, as of 2012, produced about 40% of their power using coal. Only now have they gone down to almost zero. But guess what? They ramped up on gas. Okay? So we need to look inwards and find local solutions to our local problems and allow the real experts to run the sector. It's as simple as that. We should stop looking for foreign people to come and do things that we already know how to do in-house. It's that simple. Otherwise, we're going to have the same conversation next year, you and I.
Quite an interesting way to leave this conversation. Thank you very much for your time on the show today, Dr. Chukwueloka Umeh. It's been a pleasure speaking with you, and we hope government is listening. 8 years is quite a long time to make sense of all of the play out we have interface right now.
Thank you once again. Thank you, David.